Good to have you with us and welcome to ARIRANG News live from our studio in Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. Let's begin in Korea's second biggest city of Busan, where the Korea-ASEAN Commemorative Summit is now underway. We have our Hwang Sung-hee standing by. Now, Sung-hee, good to see you again. What can you tell us?
Hyung-kyung, the two-day event opened with the Korea-ASEAN CEO Summit, which was basically a venue for around 570 business leaders to network and open up new business opportunities. Now, in her opening remarks, President Park Geun-hye called for a liberalization of the existing Korea-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, saying that it lacks efficiency compared to the country's other free trade deals. Take a look.
아울러 더 많은 기업들이 FTA 혜택을 누릴 수 있도록 자유화와 원산지 기준 개선이 뒤따르기를 기대합니다. 양측 정부가 조속히 추가 협상에 나설 수 있도록 기업인 여러분이 지원해 주시기를 바랍니다.
Korea's trade volume with ASEAN jumped 16-fold from some $8 billion in 1989 to $135 billion last year, making ASEAN Korea's second-largest trade partner. The region is also the number 3 investment destination for Korean businesses after the United States and China. President Park proposed diversifying their economic cooperation into the service sector beyond the energy and manufacturing sectors, showing a willingness to lift regulations if necessary.
어떤 분야의 규제 개혁이 필요한지 현장에 목소리를 전달해 주시면 아세안 국가와 협의해서 영내 포괄적 경제 동반자 협상에 반영을 하는 등 적극적으로 개선해 나가겠습니다.
And these proposals introduced by President Park today are part of Korea's efforts to reach its target trade volume of around $200 billion with ASEAN by the year 2020. Hyung-kyung?
All right, thank you, Sung-hee, very much for that report. And that was our Hwang Sung-hee reporting live from Busan. Now, since giving that keynote speech, the president has been meeting with ASEAN leaders throughout the day. When she sat down with Myanmar President Thein Sein, she said she wanted to see the two countries' ties develop further ahead of their 40th anniversary of diplomatic relations next year. To expand bilateral trade and investments, President Park asked Myanmar to help Korean firms sort out problems related to securing electricity and land in the Southeast Asian country. The Myanmar leader, in the meantime, said he wants to see more support coming from Korea for his country's agricultural development. Now, this meeting is just one out of 6 summit talks she's scheduled to have today, including with the leaders of the Philippines and Singapore. And ahead of this Korea-ASEAN Summit, Korea and Vietnam concluded free trade negotiations on Wednesday. This is in line with President Park's initiative to boost economic ties with ASEAN. It took almost 2.5 years to reach this deal. Our Choi Yu-sun takes a closer look at what this trade pact entails.
The concluding of Korea's free trade agreement with Vietnam may not seem like a big deal, considering the 7-year-old Korea-ASEAN FTA, but it's expected to help Korean small and mid-sized firms increase their exports to the Southeast Asian nation. Vietnam will remove tariffs on 200 additional products from Korea, including auto parts and cosmetics, many of which are manufactured by SMEs. Hanoi has also agreed to simplify its rules of origin and customs clearance, allowing textile and garments made in the inter-Korean Kaesang Industrial Complex to benefit from the simplified process. Seoul will open its market for nearly 500 additional Vietnamese goods, while excluding sensitive agricultural products such as rice, fresh garlic, and ginger. Korean companies specializing in tires and cotton anticipate boosting price competitiveness against their Japanese rivals in Vietnam. Compared to Tokyo's FTA with Hanoi, Korea has secured liberalization of more goods entering Vietnam, 2 percentage points higher in terms of import value. Considering Vietnam is Korea's #1 investment destination in Southeast Asia, the two sides have also bolstered protective measures for their respective investors. Although the FTA with Vietnam will have a relatively limited effect on the domestic economy, it's expected to help Korea in joining regional trade networks such as the China-led FTAAP. It's also expected to speed up negotiations for two-way deals with other ASEAN members to increase Korean businesses' usage of the trade pact. Choi Yu-sun, ARIRANG News, Busan.
Now, in other news, South Korea's unification minister is in Washington meeting with the U.S. Senior officials in charge of North Korea policies. There, he emphasized the importance of Seoul and Washington taking a fresh approach when tackling Pyongyang's nuclear program. Shin Se-min has more.
Speaking at a forum on Korean unification in the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday, Unification Minister Ryu Gil-ja said Seoul and Washington needed to work more closely together to engage with North Korea.
To make the pressure more effective, dialogues and cooperation are also necessary. Our two countries should therefore strengthen our coordination for engagement as well.
U.S. Assistant Secretary of State agreed and said the allies needed to make it clear to Pyongyang that its pursuit of nuclear weapons leads to a dead end.
North Korea can never achieve the security and the prosperity that it desires while also pursuing nuclear weapons.
Minister Ryu said South Korea and the U.S. needed to come up with creative and diverse approaches to resolve the North Korean nuclear issue, and that it was important to make sure the North knows the benefits of cooperating with the outside world. He said that would ultimately open up more options for North Korea, boosting the quality of life for the North Korean people and demonstrating the regime was serious about improving its human rights problems. Most importantly, Ryu asked for international support, including from the U.S., for Seoul's drive for a peaceful unification, as it will provide growth momentum for the global economy at large. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Now, meanwhile, also in Washington, North Korean defectors in the U.S. were given a chance to talk about their experiences on Wednesday local time. Speaking at the U.S. State Department, 24-year-old Joseph Kim and 21-year-old Park Geun-hye recounted fleeing famine and escaping the regime in their teenage years. They urged attending American officials, including U.S. Special Envoy for North Korean Human Rights Issues, Robert King, to help North Korea and its people have a better future. They also called on China to stop repatriating defectors back to the North. Korea's central bank is holding its key interest rate steady at 2% for now, but there are mounting expectations that another cut will come early next year, and that's fanning concerns of record-growing household debts here in the nation. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
The Bank of Korea has decided to stand pat on its key interest rate, allowing more time to gauge the impact of two previous rate cuts in the second half of this year. The central bank held the key rate unchanged at 2% in December, following its monthly monetary policy meeting on Thursday. The central bank lowered the rate in August and October each by 0.25 percentage point. The rate cuts, which came in line with government efforts to boost the ailing domestic economy, left the country's base rate at an historic low, not seen since the height of the global financial crisis in 2009. Still, market expectations are growing of an additional rate cut early next year. They're being driven by recent monetary easing in neighboring countries like China and Japan, along with weak economic sentiment at home despite aggressive government stimulus measures. Low inflation also leaves room for more rate cuts. But lowering the key rate would stoke concerns about snowballing household debt that already stands at roughly $950 billion. The government's deregulation drive in the housing sector and a lower key interest rate worked in tandem to boost housing loans. Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan also emphasizes the importance of structural reforms to pull the economy out of its low-growth rut, as top central banker Lee Ju-yeol says the current 2% rate is sufficient to support the country's recovery momentum. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Now, private investors today had a chance to apply for shares of JAIL Industries, Samsung Group's de facto holding company, which will make its debut on the main bourse next week. But the winners that will cash in big stand to be the heirs to the Samsung throne. Song Ji-sun reports.
What is currently a 100-to-1 competition to buy shares could swell in size by the end of the day. The race is on to own shares of JAIL Industries, the de facto holding firm of Samsung Group, which will be listed next Thursday. Some $14 billion have been deposited in bids by noon for the 5.7 million shares that are available to the public. The third largest IPO ever in the country is made even more attractive due to the listing price, set at just under $50 per share. Many market watchers forecast that figure will easily surpass $100 soon after trading begins on the main bourse.
When you invest in and bid for a share seeking profit, you want the share price to jump to double its IPO price. I'm hoping that will happen in this case since Samsung's a big and stable company.
The company has a diverse portfolio, and there is internal demand from Samsung's subsidiaries. These factors have investors bullish about its mid- and long-term profit outlook.
But the biggest beneficiaries will not be the individual investors. Samsung Group chairman Lee Geun-hye's three children acquired a 40% stake in the company for just $8 million in 1996 through a controversial arrangement, which critics say ensured the controlling family maintained a firm grip on the conglomerate. Lee's heirs are also estimated to have evaded billions of dollars in inheritance taxes and stand to gain some $5 billion in cash if JAIL shares hit $100. Samsung's IPOs and restructuring measures this year are expected to help the chairman's three children gain better control over the conglomerate. The transfer of ownership from the Samsung chairman to his children became an urgent issue for the conglomerate this year, especially after Chairman Lee's heart attack in May. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
OPEC says there will be more oil produced than consumed next year, and on that projection, global oil prices tumbled again on Wednesday, some even to fresh 5-year lows. Kim Min-ji has this report.
OPEC has slashed its estimates for oil demand for 2015. It has lowered its projection to 28.9 million barrels a day, which is down about 300,000 from its previous forecast. The figure is the lowest in 12 years and down about 1 million barrels from what it's currently producing each day. With the cartel's official production target set at 30 million barrels a day, more oil will be produced than consumed next year. The downward revision reflects the upward adjustment of non-APEC and U.S. shale supplies. OPEC says global oil demand is forecast to increase by 1.1 million barrels a day next year, but this will be offset by the estimated growth of 1.36 million in non-OPEC supply. Following the news, global oil prices tumbled to fresh 5-year lows. West Texas Intermediate oil finished 4.5% down at just under $61 per barrel on Wednesday on the New York Mercantile Exchange. This is the lowest level since July 2009. The benchmark Brent crude fell nearly 4% to $64.24. Crude oil prices have slumped by around 40% since June, and experts say it could fall further next year. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
The photo sharing application Instagram is now bigger than Twitter. The company says 300 million people use the app every month, with about 360,000 new users signing up every day. Now, in terms of active users, that's more than Twitter, which had about 280 million active users as of October. Instagram, which was bought out by Facebook in 2012, says 70% of its users come from outside the U.S. and users share 70 million photos per day on average. Now, the rapid penetration of smartphones has given nearly every person here in Korea access to the internet. According to a joint survey conducted by the ICT Ministry and the Korea Internet and Security Agency on some 25,000 households nationwide, 98.5% are able to get online now. 84% of those households owned at least one smartphone. That's up from 65% 2 years ago, and nearly 60% of them said they used their smartphones to shop online. The number of people using instant messaging has also jumped to nearly 90%, driven mainly by a surge of users in their 40s and 50s. Cheaper beef is expected to hit Korean shelves starting Friday as a bilateral free trade agreement with Australia takes effect. Korea's Trade Ministry says the current tariff of 40% will drop by nearly 3 percentage points starting tomorrow. It will continue to be lowered gradually over a 15-year period. Now, watchers expect to see a more noticeable and immediate effect in the prices of Australian wines, though, as the 15% import tax will be eliminated all at once on Friday.
Bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
Time magazine has given this year's honor of Person of the Year to the men and women fighting on the front lines of the Ebola outbreak. Now, you may not recognize most of the 5 individuals on the 5 separate covers, but they represent the healthcare workers fighting every day on the ground. Among those pictured were Liberia's Dr. Jerry Brown and American missionary Dr. Kent Brantley. In its tribute, the magazine applauded their bravery and commitment. It said they were willing to stand and fight the epidemic so the rest of the world can sleep at night, and so the global health system could catch up with a solution to end the war. To date, Ebola has killed more than 6,300 people in West Africa's Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, with the death rate currently at about 70%. And back here in Korea, local researchers have developed 2 new sensor technologies, one that could give prosthetic limbs the ability to feel, and another that could make you more like a certain superhero. Connie Lee has this report.
On his arms are patches of artificial skin. It's as smooth and elastic as real skin. The artificial skin consists of a network of sensors made of silicon and gold that mimic the sensory capabilities of real skin. Meaning it can sense if something is hot or cold, or if an object is wet or dry. The stretchable skin developed by researchers from Seoul National University could one day cover prosthetic limbs, like a hand. Professor Kim Dae-hyung, who led the project, said that more testing is needed to determine to what extent the feelings could be felt. And before this artificial skin can actually be used on prosthetic limbs, scientists still need to figure out how to connect it to human nerves. And how about getting some spider senses? Researchers also from Seoul National University have developed new sound and motion sensors inspired by spiders. A team of scientists led by Choi Man-soo designed these highly sensitive, flexible sensors that can recognize speech patterns, monitor heart rates, and detect and record music. These sensors, which consist of a polymer sheet coated with a thin platinum film, were inspired by the crack-shaped slit organs on spider legs. The organs allow spiders to detect very small vibrations in their surroundings. So in the real world, this new technology placed on a human neck could recognize simple words and also sense the earliest tremors before an earthquake. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And now moving on to the cultural front, 마당놀이 in Korean literally means playing in a yard, but it's also the name of a performance that was a phenomenon here in Korea for over 30 years. Now this year, the performance is back, and our Im Yoon-hee has the details.
For 3 generations,
it's developed a reputation as Korea's national performance. From dancing in bright, colorful dresses to parading around with others, Madang-nori invites the people of Korea to join in on the different forms of traditional folk entertainment. Here, the lines are blurred between the audience and the cast. Madang-nori disappeared 4 years ago, but now it's come back with more humor and entertainment than ever before. After all, Madang-nori means a place to play, and that's precisely what everyone here intends on doing.
We're always curious about the reactions we'll get, whether it be a question or a comment. As we pass people in the audience, they might pat us on the arms or say, "Oh, there goes Baengdeok." Or maybe they'll say, "Why couldn't you do it?" Or, "Baengdeok, you're such a terrible person." So we always have to consider the lively spontaneity of Madang-nori while acting.
There are 4 sides to our stage, so the attention has to be distributed to all sides. And when we toss the lines, we have to really throw it. So instead of father, it needs to be father. How do you do? Each line needs to be clearly thrown like that.
Madang-nori has now entered the stage. For what was once a performance of the streets, the transition to a formal stage requires a bit of rehearsal. The entire show relies on the consistent rhythm that carries throughout, uniting the 3 resident families of the National Theater of Korea: the National Orchestra, the National Dance Company, and of course, the National Changguk Company. The 3 companies come together on a single stage, each contributing its strengths and unique abilities. Together, they create a box, a 4-sided box, ready to house the performance and the audience into one show where each and every individual can share the experience as a member of this community.
With the idea of community in mind, we didn't want it to be another regular show for the viewers. It involves a lot of communication with the audience, and there's a reason for that. Since it's on a stage, we still wanted to facilitate the communication between everyone. So we built the 4 sides and backed each with banners to create our own space. We also incorporated the use of projectors with the banners so that everyone can be together in the experience. Through this setup, we get a lot more variety and freedom to create that tension between the audience and cast.
The pure-hearted Shim-chung makes the ultimate sacrifice and gives up her life to the lake so that her father can regain his vision. And because of her love for her father, she is saved and blossoms with the beautiful lotus flower in a place where the past is met with the present. A place where the loving, selfless acts go on to do more than anyone had imagined as Shim-chung comes to save the day. Im Yoon-hee, ARIRANG News.
It's a windy afternoon here in Korea. Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. The snow has cleared out, but temperatures have dropped compared to yesterday, and currently the winds are strong at 6.4 meters per second. That means the wind chill is down to -5 degrees. The wind chill is expected to drop even more throughout the day, so make sure to bundle up before heading outside. The cloudy skies have now mostly cleared and bringing out the sun as well. However, more heavy snow is expected to fall tomorrow, starting from the west of the peninsula and eventually expanding across the whole nation. And most areas will see somewhere between 1 and 5 centimeters. And to our readings for today, so it'll peak to 1 degrees this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 7 and 10 degrees. And moving over to other regions such as Jeju-wan, peaks up to 10. Dokdo hits 6 degrees, while Mangkang can be a bit chilly at -1. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park. Now, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we have for now. Thanks for watching. More news coming up at 6 p.m. Korea time. Do stay with ARIRANG.